Hello, my name is Steve Waldron, and I'm the GIS coordinator and instructor here in the City of Richmond. The purpose of this video, named Intro to ArcGIS Online Part 1, is to orient city employees to the city's implementation of ArcGIS Online. Orientation to the city's implementation of ArcGIS Online is a requirement for most employees that will use GIS. ArcGIS Online is the hosted cloud environment used by the city. ArcGIS Online is an extension of the city's GIS, which city employees may be set up to use. ArcGIS Online is also the preferred solution we provide to our customers. Today, I will be conducting a slide presentation of materials and how-to instructions for using ArcGIS Online, while also toggling to ArcGIS Online to perform actual demonstrations. If you are watching this video to be oriented to the city's ArcGIS Online implementation, then this means you should have already coordinated with the DIT GIS team to have your ArcGIS Online account set up. At the very end of the slide presentation is an exercise to get you your first hands-on experience with the city's ArcGIS Online environment, which you can do on your own. One important note, you will be instructed to contact our GIS office via email to notify us that you have attended this orientation. We like to keep track of the students who have watched our videos. And you should also proceed to take the Part 2 class once you have finished this Part 1 class. So, without further ado, let's jump in and start the presentation. When you log in to ArcGIS Online, this is what you're going to see on the home screen. And across the top are a series of menu items. Today's class is going to focus on the Map menu, and we'll spend a brief time on the Content menu to get you started. Here, I have toggled over into ArcGIS Online. You can see in the top right, I'm logged in as Steve Waldron. This is the home page. Here is the Map menu, and here is the Content menu. We will start by clicking on Content. Content means this is your workspace. This is your work area in ArcGIS Online. It is only accessible to you. Other people cannot access your content. They cannot mess around with your items. Only you can. So we associate content as your workspace. And over on the left-hand side, this is where you will see that you can create folders or directories to keep your content organized. There is also a button here to create new folder. So before we get too involved, let's create a folder just to keep our materials organized for this class. So to create a folder, you just click on Create New Folder and give it a name. It remembers the fact that I've used demo previously. So I will name my folder Demo. And here we can see it created demo. It switched me to that folder, and currently there are no items in my folder yet. We could view other folders. If I click on this one, I can see all this content inside this folder. If I click on this other folder, I have an item in that folder. So just like you would do on your own computer, you create folders to keep your files organized. It's the same way in ArcGIS Online. This slide is just showing you what I demonstrated. Your workspace is here. You can create folders to organize your content. We will discuss folder creation and organization in much greater detail in the Part 2 class for ArcGIS Online onboarding. Okay, having covered content, we're going to spend the rest of our time together working in the map. So, what the slide presentation is showing us is the first thing we want to do is click on Map, and it will open up a dialog that looks like this. This is a web map. Step 2 is you can create a new map, or if you've been working in ArcGIS Online previously, it will recognize any maps you've been working in and you could pick it off the list. For us, we will be creating a new map. And then step 3 is to click Save. The next slide shows you what happens after you click Save. All items, including maps, require that you provide metadata. So if you're going to save a file, you're going to save a web map, in other words, you need to provide a title. You need to provide tags. Tags are words that can be used for when you're doing searches in ArcGIS Online. You can search for things based on tag words, and you should provide a short summary that describes what this map is about. And of course, you can save it in a folder in your workspace. And then you just click Save Map to complete the process. So I'm going to toggle back out. Here I am. I'm in Steve Waldron's workspace. I'm going to click on Map, and the system opens what's called a web map. Step 2, notice it recognizes recent maps I've worked in, or I can create a new map. By default, it's creating a new map. And step 3 is you hit Save. So when I hit Save, it's going to prompt me to provide metadata. So I'm not going to be too creative with this. Um, let's just call this Steve's new map. For tag words, if you were creating an actual product, you would probably include tag words that would help people locate or find your web map. But for my purposes, I'm just going to use the word test, and I'll be deleting my demo folder and this web map at the end of this class, so I don't have to spend too much time on it. For summary, we'll say this web map is used to demonstrate ArcGIS users. And what folder do I want to save it in? I'm going to save it in my demo folder. Okay, I'm going to hit Save Map. And I'm going to go back to my presentation. Okay, real easy to make a web map. So once you've created a web map, usually the first thing people want to know how to do is, how do I find the city's GIS layers to add to my map? So that's what this section covers. Step 1 is there's an Add Data button. We want you to use Add Data and search for layers. Step 2, by default, it wants to search my content or whatever's in your workspace is what that means, but you should change this. Use the option to search my organization. This will allow you to search the City of Richmond's organization. So you can search all of the data that we have in ArcGIS Online. Once you've chosen that, this is the dialog you will see. There's a space to search for layers here. So you could type in words or things that you're looking for. Based on the words you enter, the list will be filtered and show you any results that it finds. If you see a layer that you suspect you want to use, you can click on the plus sign and it will be added to your map. And when you're done searching for layers, there's a little left arrow mouse here that you can click on to get back to your table of contents. But I'll show you how this works, but the best way, perhaps, an alternate method, is to use the filter button, which is located right here. So you would still go to add data, you would still change it to be my organization, but you would click on filter, and then you would expand the categories. So we've categorized all of our GIS data for you. The layers library is basically a listing of all of our enterprise layers. If you are interested in addresses, well, those are going to be categorized under addressing. If you're interested in public school layers, those are going to be located under education, etc. So I'm going to jump into ArcGIS Online and demonstrate this to you. Here I am back at my web map. I'm going to use the Add Data button. I'm going to do a search for layers, and I'm going to change this to be a search on my organization. And I'm going to use the filter button right here. Here's the categories. And we can see we have all these different categories of data. So let's say I'm interested in parcels. I happen to know under real estate is where I'm going to find these. And I can scroll through here and I can see, hey, here are the parcels published by Parrish Simmons. And it looks like he updated it last on June 14th. I'll add that to the map. I'm also interested in using the addresses for our demo purposes. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to do a search for addresses. So addresses is here. I'm going to add that to my map. And how about council districts? That's going to be found under election districts. And as we scroll through, here we find council districts. You can use a combination of categories and searching by keywords. Use the word council and I spell it correctly. Okay, it found 3. So here's the council districts. I'm going to add that layer. I'm going to close my filter. I'm going to use this left arrow to get back to my table of contents. And here, if I click content, this shows the layers that are available. You can turn them on and off. If you want to view the legend, this shows you how the features are currently being symbolized. We'll spend more time on that a bit later. Okay. Finding GIS layers, you can do searches by words. You can use the filter by categories. But once you get a GIS layer added to the map, well, what do you want to do with it? There's a lot of things you can do with the GIS layer once you've added it to the map. What this slide is showing us are some things that I will demonstrate. There are tools. So in this example, hovering over parcels reveals these tools. These tools exist for all GIS layers that you add to a web map. The first one is an attribute table, so you can view the attributes of the layer. This tool here lets you symbolize or thematically map your data. This tool is the filter tool, so it lets you filter the data based on a query. Number 4, you can adjust the transparency of a layer. Number 5, you can set the visibility range. I'm going to be demonstrating these to you to show how these techniques can be used. You can rename a layer in your table of contents if you like. You can remove a layer if you don't want it anymore. And a very powerful idea is you can configure a pop-up. What this means is when a user is using your interactive web map, if they click on the map and they click on a feature, what information do you want to show them? That's called configuring a pop-up. And of course, we can create labels. So I'm going to jump out of the presentation and get back into ArcGIS Online. Here we are. We're back at the web map. I think before I start, I'm just going to hit the save button to save my work. And I'm going to zoom in to an area. Just pick this is kind of near Manchester in the South Richmond. And the first thing I'll do is I'm going to turn on the parcels and turn off the council districts. So here we can see as we zoom in and out, the parcels are drawing. If we hover over any of these layers, you can see these tools appear. Well, let's stick with parcels. And the first tool we want to look at is to show the table. So what does the table look like for parcels? The table will show you the attribute values that are available for any GIS layer. So you can examine the data. You can see all the different attribute fields. For example, there's a field called land use. Um, there's information in here about the total value or just the dwelling value of the property. You've got things like the owner name. So there's lots of attributes that the GIS has for parcels in this example. I think for us, we're going to use those two that we pointed out. Let's use land use and let's use dwelling values to do some further demos. When you're done viewing the table, you can close the pin out here with this X and the table will go away. Okay, let's show you how to map the data with the change style tool. Click on it. By default, the layers are all being drawn the same way. Every parcel is a green outline. Well, we can map data based on their attributes with the GIS. So let's go and map this data by land use. So if I choose the attribute field land use, the system will automatically interpret those values. It'll automatically pick a color that it wants to use for each of the land use values and display it that way in the map. So we can see single family, those are the red polygons. Green are the vacant ones. Now, the system picks the initial colors, but you don't have to stick with them. You can do your own color assignments. So in the style tool, you can go to options. You could change these colors. Let's say we want the single family to have no fill, and we want the outline color to be this kind of a brownish color. I'll hit OK. I'll hit OK. So here you can see the symbol changed in the legend and the symbol changed on the map. These are single family parcels, the ones that are transparent with the brown outline. So you can adjust these colors however you like. This is a text attribute field, right? These are text values. Let's demonstrate mapping using numerical data. So instead of land use, let's go use that dwelling value. Here's the attribute field for dwelling value. What the system will do is it will automatically map it the way it wants to do by default. I'll zoom out a little bit. What you see here is it applies a color ramp. So dwelling values are displayed on a range. The darker the value, the higher the number. So the greater the value of the dwelling. No surprises here. I believe this is the SunTrust Bank headquarters here. I believe this is a public school. These are very expensive buildings compared to single family houses, which have a very light color. So when you're mapping numerical information, you can also go in and change the color schemes if you like. You just go to options and you could change the symbols. So maybe you want it to be something like yellow to red instead. Okay, you can pick whatever color ramps you like. You can also classify the data. So you can group the data in different ways. By default, it's using natural breaks. So it's looking for clusters in the data. You can adjust the number of classes. I'm going to go up to 10 classes. You saw how it shifted? We have more classes of data now. The data is being classified differently. You could do, here's an interesting one. You could do equal interval. So what that does, you can see in the legend, it gives equal spacing between the high and low values for each section or each grouping. That's equal interval. Or you could do standard deviation with numerical data. So you can look for the outliers in your data, right? So anything that's dark red is way to the right of the standard of the norm. Anything in light color is way to the left of normal in your curve. So you can do standard deviations. There's all the kinds of different ways that you can thematically map numerical data. Quantile is an interesting one. Let's go back down to 4. So there's all these different ways. You're in control. You can experiment with the data. You can thematically map it, kind of analyze it. So think about the kind of data that you might end up working with and how you can thematically map it, whether it's text or whether it's numerical data. I'm going to go and change this back. I'm going to hit cancel. I'm going to map the parcels by location only. I'm just going to take the default color that it's using here. So by default, if I click on legend up here, you can see they're displayed with like a rusty brown color and a white outline. It means you can see better. Okay. Uh, Next tool, the filter tool. So we looked at table, we looked at symbolizing or change style. This one is called filter. This is a tool you can use to query the data and only show the features that meet the criteria for what you want to see. So let's pretend we're doing a study. We're only interested in seeing dwellings, or let's say properties that have a dwelling value of $50,000 or less. So all you have to do is fill out this query. The first section is the field you want to query. These are all the same fields you saw in the attribute table. So one of those fields was called dwelling value. And we're going to say is less than, and we're going to type a value in here. I'm going to type in 50,001. I'm going to apply the filter. All these parcels you see remaining meet that filter criteria. I'm going to click on this one, and we can see the dwelling value is 8,000. Okay, all the other parcels disappeared because they're being filtered in a way that they're not going to display. So again, I ask you to think about the kind of data that you might interact with and the attributes that you might have, and how might you want to filter that information for displaying to your end customer. Okay, let's go and turn on the council districts for our next demonstration. And I'm going to thematically map the council districts so that every council district has its own unique color. So it's kind of a review, but we do that under change style. And I want to map them by their name. And I'll hit done here. Okay, so we can see if I click on legend here, each council district is getting a solid color fill. And the next tool I want to demonstrate is I'll point out that when I hover over this GIS layer, you'll see the what's called more options. It's this little ellipsis here with the three dots. If you click on it, you get a drop down of even more tools. So the first one I want to demo is called transparency. So as I hover over it, we can see we get the slider bar. If we go all the way to the right, it becomes invisible. If we go all the way to the left, it becomes opaque. Somewhere in between, it starts to adjust its transparency for see-through. And why is this important? Sometimes you're going to have polygon layers or layers with polygon features, and you may or may not want to be able to see through them. So this is how you can control that behavior in your web map. Okay. Um, Next, I'm going to turn on addresses. Notice some data, it makes no sense to turn those layers on when you're zoomed way out. All right, this is just a mess. I shouldn't be viewing addresses at this scale. I'm going to zoom in on South Side again. And it's still a little cluttered map, but let's demonstrate how we can control the behavior of when GIS layers turn on or off when we're using ArcGIS Online. So I'm going to hover over addresses to see more tools. And there's an option here called set visibility. This works just like the slider bar we saw for transparency. You grab the little marker and you can slide it to the right. And the further to the right is the closer zoom level for that layer. So I've moved it just underneath this black triangle. The black triangle represents the current scale that you're viewing the map at. And with the slider bar, I've set it so that these features will not display until we zoom in closer. So watch what happens when I zoom in once. Hey, they turned on. If I zoom out, they turn off. Let me zoom back in and then show you that tool again. Set visibility range. We can see that it's barely outside to the left of that black triangle. That's because we hit the map scale at which we want that feature to display. Now, this is important because when you are designing an interactive web map for an end user, you might have layers that you want to display or not display at certain scales. That's like a behavior of the map. It's a user experience that you can control. Okay, next tool. Addresses. We'll stick with addresses. The next tool is rename. Who knows? Maybe I want this to be called Richmond addresses. Okay. Maybe I want these parcels to be called Parcels less than $50,000. Okay, so you can rename them in your map. You're not actually renaming the source data, but just in your table of contents. So um, let's go and apply, let's learn a new tool. Here's the council districts. Let's say I'm done with council districts. I don't actually want this to be in my map. You can click on more tools and choose to remove it. It asks you if you're really sure you want to do that. So it's gone. Very easy to remove. And now let's learn how to use a really powerful tool called the pop-up tool. So I'm going to turn off these addresses for a moment. And when I click on this parcel, a pop-up is going to appear. We can see it includes all these attribute values. Some of these attribute values don't even make any sense for an end user to see, right? We don't care what the global ID is or the object ID. We don't even know what that means. So let's pretend my end user experience for my customers is I only want them when they click on a feature, I want them to see the PIN. What's the parcel identification number? I'd like to show them who the owner name, and what is the actual dwelling value. So I'm hovering over parcels to get the tools to pop up. I'm going to click on more tools, and it's the tool down here called Configure Pop-up. So here's the dialog we fill out. You notice when I click on it, the name is appearing in the title, and that's because by default, it's using the owner name attribute field. You could use any attribute field you want to be the title of the pop-up, or you don't have to use any. You could type whatever you want in here. So I'm going to call it dwelling value analysis. Now, there's a hyperlink here called configure attributes. This is what I'm teaching you to use. If you click on it, by default, you can see everything is checked on. If you needed to learn what is contained in these attribute fields, you would have reviewed them in the table tool. So I'm going to turn them all off for now. And I said what I wanted people to see is the parcel identification number, the owner name, and the dwelling value, and that's it. That's the experience I want my users to have. When you use a numerical field, you can control, the use of decimal places or commas for thousand separator. I don't want any decimal places, and I'll use the comma separator. I'll hit OK. I'm going to close this. I'm going to hit OK over here to apply the change. And now look what happens when I click on any of these features. It has the title I entered and only the fields that I want my users to see when they click on a feature for that GIS layer. So you have control over that. That's a user experience. Those are called pop-ups, and you can you can actually get quite creative with pop-ups. Um, but for an intro course, that's about as far as I'm going to go with them today. The last tool we're going to learn is labeling. So I want to use the Richmond addresses for this. So I'm going to hover over that layer. I'm going to go to more tools, and let's take a look at creating labels. By now you've gathered, anytime you click on a tool, the system will automatically interpret or do what it wants to do initially until you go in and configure it to be different. So if I click create labels, it's going to create some labels. Okay, it looks like it's sticking the street names for each of these address points. So to configure the dialog, you can decide what attribute field do you want to see displayed. So think about the kind of data you might have and what labels you want to see. So I'm going to choose building number. That's what I want. I want the color. I want these to be blue. This is a good technique, guys. You can use halo. And I like to use a halo with a fill factor of 3. What this does is you can kind of blot out underneath it to make it more legible, especially if you're going to be using the base map, an ortho photography base map. This is helpful. This section here is about the alignment of your label. So for points, it looks like by default, it's putting it to the top right. You could put it on the bottom right. You could put it right on top of the feature. I think I'll go with that. And then the visibility range for labels. So remember we controlled the visibility of addresses? Well, you can also control the visibility of labels. So I'm going to move that a little bit lower so they won't display until we zoom in really close. Okay, I'm going to hit OK. And now I'm going to zoom out. The address points are gone. I zoom in. I got to that threshold we set earlier so that they display at the scale. I zoomed in again. The labels still don't appear. But if I zoom in once more, boom, there they are. The labels are displaying. So just like you can control when features are visible, you're probably going to want to control labels to be visible at certain scales. So that's part of the user experience in interacting with your web map. All critical skills and, through experimentation, trial and error, and experience, you'll become quite good at using these tools. I'm going to go ahead and save my work, and I'm going to return to the presentation. Okay, moving right along. You're not limited to using just the City of Richmond's data. You can use non-Richmond data, which is new for many of us who are new to using web GIS. And the way you can find other kinds of data not belonging to the city is by going back to the Add Data button. And instead of choosing My Organization, you have two other options that I'm going to orient you to. One is you can choose Living Atlas. This represents ESRI's data that they make available. Remember, ESRI is our GIS software vendor. There's thousands and thousands of GIS layers that they make available nationwide and worldwide that we are free to use. The other option is called ArcGIS Online. So this means you can go and search anyone else's content that's being shared in a way that allows us to have access. So, for example, our neighboring counties are sharing data with the public. Well, guess what? We can use that if we want to. In turn, they can use our data because we're sharing our data. So there's no silo or breakdown. We're breaking down the silos and we're able to share data across localities. So I'm going to jump into do another demo. We'll keep using my web map. And first we'll use Esri. So I'm going to use the Add Data button. I'm going to search for layers. I don't want to search the organization. I'm going to clear my search word here so I don't have any words being used. And I'm going to use Living Atlas. All right. They're telling us that there's over 5,000 layers available. And let's do a search for, I don't know, the word soil. They've got 135 layers dealing with soil. Um, let's see if we can find a good one. Let's use USA Soils Map Units. And let's go back to the City of Richmond here. Okay. So look at that. You can see this is the City of Richmond, but they're showing data that's in the counties. They don't they don't clip things out by any jurisdictions. This is nationwide. I can zoom in anywhere on the map to see. If I click on, let me get rid of this searching tool to get back to my legend. Here are the soils map units. So if you're a geologist or a environmental scientist, this can mean something for you. I'm just a GIS guy. So I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to click on one of these features and look at these fancy pop-ups that ESRI is providing. Pretty cool. You can learn how to do these kinds of pop-ups for your data if you wish. Okay. So we could look for all kinds of data, search for layers in the Living Atlas. Okay. We search for soil, but this is how you can find census data, right? A lot of people are interested in census information. How about census and poverty? Here's um, there's 26 layers being provided here. Okay. So we could use any of these layers if we choose to add to my map, to our map. I'll just pick this one so we can look at it. Okay, so this is census data. If we click on it, it's by census tract. And they have a pretty fancy pop-up as well. Okay, now let's show you how to find county data. I'm going to go ahead and turn off these other layers because I don't want to use them. Here we are. We're back at the web map with no layers turned on. And I'm going to use add data, search for layers. And I want to search ArcGIS Online. Okay, I just cleared out my search word. So I'm going to type in the word Henrico. And there's 268 layers appearing here. What's interesting, we can see who is publishing these things. So this one's published by GIS Office. So that sounds like it's probably the official layer. Address points by the GIS Office. Historical markers. Hey, fire hydrants. Let's add fire hydrants. So these are the fire hydrants published by the County of Henrico. Let me get this GIS search tool out of the way. By default, they don't have them turned on, so I'll turn them on myself. Cool. Look at that. Let me zoom in. So Henrico is sharing their fire hydrants, so people can use the fire hydrants in their GIS. If we were publishing our fire hydrants publicly, they should be able to pull up and look at ours, and we could see them together. We can mash them up together. So the idea is really powerful here that there's a breakdown of all these silos of data because everyone's sharing their data through web GIS. I'm going to go back to the presentation. Let's see what's next. This is just a little bit of advice for you. When you first start using ArcGIS Online and you're working in a web map, you might be working on multiple projects, right? And so you need to be able to stop working in one web map, go back to your workspace, your content, and work on another. So what I want to point out to you is when you're in your web map, in order to get back on the top left corner, you'll see the home button with a little down arrow. And it presents you the same menu items you saw across the top of the page when you first logged in to ArcGIS Online. So you're never really lost. You can always get back to your workspace by clicking there and then choosing content. So let's go back to my web map. Let's say I'm done. I'm going to hit save to save my work. And here's that home button I was pointing out. So we could go back to our workspace by just going to content. I'm back in Steve Waldron's workspace. This is where all my stuff is. So you're never lost. You can always go to the top left corner and go to that home option. Okay, what's next? Here's a great idea. Think about this. Let's say you're working on a project and you think and you know you're going to have to create multiple maps. Each map is going to be a little bit different, but they're all going to be have the same basic underlying functionality. So let's say you spend time adding the parcels you want. They're symbolized the way you want. You got a couple of basic GIS layers you know you want in each of your maps. So you spend a bunch of time, you get the pop-ups configured. You spend all this time working and getting it perfected. We don't have to repeat all those steps by going into a new web map and starting all over again to create the second one, and then repeating it to create a third one. Here's my recommendation. You can use the Save As option to save your map as a copy of itself. So in other words, it essentially is a template. So I'll show you how I've done that. I'll go back to my workspace. And in my workspace, I have a folder called App Template, and I have a web map, and it's called Map Template. So let's take a look at it. Go ahead and view it. So I spent a lot of time configuring it to display parcels at a certain scale and address labels at a certain scale. If I click on a feature, I might have custom pop-ups. So if I don't want to have to repeat the setup of everything I've done in this web map, I don't have to. As the name implies, I'm calling this a map template. So I can choose to go Save As. And again, you're creating a copy of it. So you have to provide metadata. So I'm going to call this Steve's new map. I'm not going to get fancy with any tags or updating the summary, but I'm going to save it in my demo folder, which I created at the beginning of the class. Oh, let's call it another map. Okay, I want to get out of this and go back to my workspace. What do? I don't see my options on the top. That's because they're over here on the drop down. So let's go back to content. And let's scroll down to my demo folder. Hey, look at that. I've got another map. Okay, I just created that. And if I open it, I can see it's going to look just like the map template from which it came. Okay, so don't reinvent the wheel over and over again. Create a map that has the basic settings you want, save it somewhere, and then just go and repurpose it by choosing to open it and then save as. So in a way, you're using it as a template. Big time saver, big time saver. Okay, next slide. Sharing. You are in control over who can see your content. By default, when you create a new item, it will not be shared with anyone other than owner. which means only you can see it. So what you can do is you can update the property for sharing, and there's a couple of different ways you can do it. I'll show you a couple of ways, but you can share it with the organization, which means anyone who works in the City of Richmond can see it, but the public can't. Or you can choose to share with everyone, which means the public can see it. So you're in control of that. Let me go up here and go back to my workspace. You can see here, I'm hovering over the sharing property here. It's saying the sharing level is owner, and you can tell by the icon. It's just a little icon of a person. So if I click on it, I could change it to be shared with the organization, which means my coworkers should be able to see it. Notice the icon changed. So that's a visual cue. Let's say I want this one to be shared with the public. So now this web map can be shared with citizens. I'm going to click on this web map and point out that everything in ArcGIS Online has what's called an overview page. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be a GIS layer, it could be a GIS map, it could be some type of application, whatever it is, everything has an overview page. So I'm going to click on another map to get to the overview page. We'll talk more about the overview page in the ArcGIS Online Part 2 class, but I just wanted to point out that this is where there's information about the item. So this is where information about the web map can be researched and edited and updated. So if you ever want to open a web map, you're going to choose to open it in Map Viewer Classic, or you could choose to open it in what's called Map Viewer. Either way. Currently, we're supporting Map Viewer Classic, so I'll click on it. And that's how you'll open the web map. If you want to share this web map with somebody, you can send them, copy and paste this URL. And you send that to somebody, or you use it as a link on a web page, and it will allow a person to open this up. If it's shared with everyone publicly, they can include people outside of the City of Richmond's ArcGIS Online organization. Okay, I'm going to go back to my workspace, and then I'm going to go back to the presentation. So that's sharing. Printing. You'll see a button at the top of a web map. It's got a little printer on it, and you can choose to print the map, or print the map plus its legend. What I would like to say about ArcGIS Online and printing maps is that WebGIS, like ArcGIS Online, it isn't about making hard copy maps. Okay, it's about creating experiences with an interactive web map that people can use to really dive in and interact with the data, right? So we're talking about sharing that URL with people so that they can go in, zoom, click on things, and investigate. We're not talking about creating an 8.5 by 11 hard copy piece of paper or a PDF, a static PDF file that you're going to attach to an email and send around, and it's stagnant. But sometimes you just need a down and dirty map, right? You need to be able to draw on it, mark up on it, kind of a working map. So of course you can use the print button, and you can print whatever your map looks like on your screen at the time. It'll just use your web browser's print functionality is what it will do. If you need to make very high-end cartographic maps, hard copy maps, posters, things like that, then you're going to become an ArcGIS Pro user. You would have to contact our office about that later, but I'll go ahead and move forward to the next slide. Okay, this is an important slide. It talks about, it's got the word workflow in here. So let me explain what's going on in this slide. The cloud represents ArcGIS Online, right? Everybody talks about the cloud nowadays. So in Amazon Web Services, we have ArcGIS Online. It's the cloud. And in the cloud, we can create web maps. You've seen in your web map, you can search for data, and anything that's in our organization is available for you from the cloud to add to your web map, which is in the cloud. Sometimes you're going to want to create your own GIS layers. And so there's two ways to do that. The first way is you can create your own GIS layers directly in ArcGIS Online and save those layers in your own workspace. We have a special class that teaches people how to do that specifically. That's an elective class, not a topic for today. The second way is we have people who are using ArcGIS Pro. So these are like our GIS professionals. They can create a layer in ArcGIS Pro and they're able to publish it up into the cloud versus creating it in ArcGIS Online directly, as I mentioned previously. But either way, a custom GIS layer can be added to the ArcGIS Online organization, and once it's there, you or anyone you share it with can add it into a web app. So the workflow part of it is just showing how everything's organized and the fact that the GIS layers may exist or may not exist yet, and the workflow for how they can be created and used. Let's talk about the training curriculum. The way to look at this slide is it should be read in a left to right fashion. Over here on the left is ArcGIS Online from top to bottom. So you should have already had an ArcGIS Online account created, and you're currently taking the Part 1 class right now. When you're done, you should watch the video for the Part 2 class as well. When you're done with that, you can be assigned and take an online learning plan, is what this means. So according to the legend, anything in green, we've got a video prepared to cover the materials, and anything in red, we don't have a video, but guess what? ESRI has one or more materials available for you to learn how to do things. So they're self-paced, they're online. You can take it. So what you can do is after you take part 1 today and part 2 in the future, we can assign you and invite you to take a learning plan for ArcGIS Online. It just takes you on a deeper dive. There's a lot of things you can do that we can't cover alone. And then over here, we have ArcGIS Pro courses. I'm going to skip that for now. And we have electives. So if you want to learn how to do mapping data based on addresses, like someone gives you a table and locations based on addresses, and you need to see that data on a map, this class, this class will teach you how to do that. Or if you want to learn how to make web apps, we have a video for that. And if you want to create GIS layers, that's what was mentioned in the previous slide about the workflow. We can teach you how to make your own GIS layers. But for now, we're just trying to get your feet underneath you and give you the basic orientation about ArcGIS Online. You'll see this slide again in future videos. The next slide is just pointing out that there is very good ArcGIS Online help that you can use to learn how to do all kinds of fantastic things, such as if you want to get advanced in your pop-ups, just go to the ArcGIS Online help and the pop-ups are covered. There's lots of examples of things that you can do. And as we wrap things up, of course, you got to know the URL, guys. Here's what you're going to map in your favorites, arcgis.com. That is the address for ArcGIS Online. Here's your assignment. You're going to be emailing me to note, or you're going to be emailing our office to notify us that you've watched the video, you've taken this class. And when we receive that, we're going to send you a link to this slide deck so that you will have all this material in a slide deck fashion instead of a video. And on page 20, you're going to find the assignment. So this is your exercise. You're going to log into ArcGIS Online with your account. You're going to create a web map. You call it My First Web Map. Then we're going to ask you to add any City of Richmond layers that you like to the map. So you're going to use your skills to search by filtering with the categories, using keywords, see what you can find. Then you're going to experiment on symbolizing those layers, right? Changing the colors, thematically mapping them. Then I want you to experiment with configuring pop-ups as you've seen covered in the slide deck. And then the last two things, I'm going to want you to go and see if you can find the Census US population density layer that Esri's giving you from the Living Atlas. And see if you can find a GIS layer from Henrico and see if you can find GIS layer from Chesterfield by searching ArcGIS Online. And this will get your feet wet. You will be exposed to using the various tools. And our last slide in the video is what's next. Well, please do the assignment from the previous slide. Number two, we want you to send us an email to this address to inform us that you've watched this video. We're keeping track of people that are taking the courses. And in response to notifying us, we're going to send you a link to the course slide deck. And then once you're done with part one, you should proceed back to the City of Richmond GIS training YouTube channel or web page that we've set up and look for the part two class because you need to take that one as well. And that is the conclusion of our Intro to ArcGIS Online course. So I wish you luck in your endeavors. And don't forget, you can always email us at this address right here. Thank you.